All right, so we're going to make this chair. And what would be nice to have about this chair is if we had some reference. So what we'll do is, in our front viewport, I'll just Alt W in my front viewport, and let me zoom out here. Now I've set my grid to be 100 centimeters, so each square is about a meter. Not that it matters much for this reference. However, we don't need these segments here, so I'm going to just say 1 and 1. So it's just a plane with no, well, 1. It's 1 quad, whatever. All right, so we don't need to change this to anything like an editable poly or anything because it's just going to hold our reference image. I'm going to hit M, and that will bring up our materials editor. I'm going to get standard under the scan line, just our basic editor. Now, when this is in a wireframe, we have to actually drag it to the wire, right? And if we are in not wireframe, and let's turn our edge faces on. Now you can see I could actually drag it out here to the actual plane itself, and it will also put the image there. So to see this, of course, we're going to need to put view, show in viewport, although we don't have a picture in there yet. So let's put our bitmap in there. Bitmap as in it's a map made of bits, not a bitmap like a BMP. This is any image really. I drag it out. I'll show that again. So I drag it out here. Let me drag this. Let me clear this. I drag it out here and immediately wants to know which image I'm talking about. So I'm going to go to my desktop, which is where I put my chair. I've got this a few times. So anyway, here's the reference image. Excuse me. I'm going to attach this to the diffuse. And because we already put show in viewport, it's here. I think this is a little distorted, so I'm going to hit the scale tool and kind of squish that because that's more the way the picture is. It's a little bit more like that. Okay, I could make this exactly the same centimeters as the image is in pixels and then scale it accordingly. That would be, you know, a way to make it perfect fit. At any rate, I know it's kind of like that, so I'm just going to use this briefly. We're not going to be exact with this. It's just a reference. Okay, so that's there. I'm going to hit P for perspective view and W for the move tool, and I'm going to push this back. I'm going to get out of the snaps there. I'm just going to push that back. So it's there, but it's not really, you know, in the way. You want to model in and around the origin. If you end up modeling out here, you're going to definitely want to move it to the origin, snap it to the origin with the pivot at the bottom, especially if it's a character or, you know, anything that's going to go into a game engine. Generally, you want the pivot point to be snapped here. We are going to start with the box, and by virtue of it being a box and the way we draw it in the perspective view, it will have the pivot point on the bottom. So we'll at least be on the origin in the X and Y. When we're done this, we'll put the pivot point right here, and the chair will be over the top of that. So the pivot point will be in the middle of the chair, but on the bottom. You know, if we hit front, you see it will be sitting on the origin. Okay, but this is fine for now. I'm going to go to the modifier. I just drew a box. It doesn't matter the height right now, but I am going to now in the modifier tab, which is next to the create tab, right? This is the create tab. We created geometry, a box. Now we are going to the modifier tab. Here's the box. This is where I'm going to adjust this. It's certainly not 2 meters tall. I'm going to make it half a meter, so that. And I think it's probably like 2.5, but I'm going to just use 3 because it's a nice even number, not a half a number. So this will work. This is going to be sort of like our IKEA chair. All right, we'll just go with this. Now, of course, I could have set some segments here, but part of the reason that we're modeling this chair is so that I can show you some tools to create the geometry that you need. So it's always best to model large polygons to the more detailed, inadvertently smaller polygons, but it's more of like a multiplied amount of polygons, so which we refer to as a high poly. And we're going to create this hard surface chair, and we are also going to have this foresight about how the textures are going to need to be on it so that we can create this geometry to be a believable chair. Okay, so that includes, you know, the direction of the wood grain, right? We want to make sure that that's correct, and we want to make sure that the seams are where the actual joints of the chair being put together would be, right? So we'll get to that. Meanwhile, I want to show you, I could indeed, you know, give us some, actually I didn't need this one. I could go like this, maybe 5, whatever. I could give us some geometry this way, but I want to show you a couple tools on how we can cut more specifically where we want this. So anyway, I can't do anything more than what I've done right now. So the way I can get down to the sub-object parts of this object is to change it into an editable poly. So we right click on here, say convert to editable poly. We could also right click on here and just click on editable poly. Some people put on the modifier an edit poly, which is, it adds a modifier to this box, but there's not really a reason to ever do this. We need to make it be an editable poly in order to do anything with it. So might as well just change it right off the bat and get to it. Another way is, if you did this, you could always collapse it, but oftentimes it'll change it to an editable mesh, such as this. All you have to do is right click on it and say editable poly. Editable. That's editable poly. Okay, so these are the sub-objects. We have our vertices, our edges. We'll get to borders later when we actually create a border. These are polygons. In Maya, it's called faces, so I might also call it a face, because once you start modeling your node, it's either a polygon or a face, and faces are polygons, so that term is sort of interchangeable. So these are polygons, these are faces, right? These are edges. Oops, I don't want to move that. Control Z if you need to do something. Vertices are the smallest part of things, right? So you can move those. All right, so what we're going to do here is take the edge, and it's easy enough to just select this. Select these edges the way we want right here, this way. If it was a more complicated thing, like say we needed this, otherwise we would have to line this up and try to select right down the middle, you know, which we could do, but that takes a little bit of time. Or we click on this edge and we can say ring. So ring makes it go all the way around. So if I click on this edge here, maybe I'll change the color of this. Go to object mode. You can go to object mode by just clicking on the word, right? I'm going to click on this and give it a more neutral color here. So if I click on this edge, I can say ring and it goes all the way around. So in this case, it's just as easy for us to drag like this. And what we're going to use is connect, but we're going to use the settings of connect, which is the little box next to the button. And I'll move this out of the way a little bit here. Excuse me. So what we want are 2 segments, and we can adjust these segments with the second control here. You can click on any of those little arrows up and down and just hold the left mouse button and just control it up and down. I'm going to move it such that this is sort of square here. So maybe a little bit more like this. And I'm going to say, okay, I think I'll just, you know what, make it an even -70, just to... If you click off it, you can just drag it again, and while you still have this control out or this menu out here. So I'll just hit OK. So now they're there. Another way to make a loop, as we would call these, this is now a loop. So if I click on that one edge and now say loop, you can see it selected it all the way around, right? So that's a loop. So we're going to make a loop around the top here. So another way to make a loop is called a swift loop. And if you go to the modeling tab here, and if you don't see this, this is a ribbon. So here's the toggle ribbon. So you can click on this and it should give you these little tabs. So you're in the modeling tab. I'm going to click on that. My menu might look different from yours, but where you want to go is the edit tab and then swift loop. And what this does is it gives you a loop perpendicular to any edge. So if I'm clicking on this edge, of course, it's going to give me a loop this way. This one's going to give it to me this way. I'm going to sort of look at this and about right there, right? So that's another way to make a loop. I right click out here and it sort of ends it. Another way to end it is to hit Q. To be sure, Q pretty much gets you out of anything, similar to the escape button in Photoshop. If you're in a tool and you want to just get out of it, like you're in the select tool and it's all stringy, the polygonal select tool or whatever, you hit escape in Photoshop. Well, this is like that. You just hit Q and it gets you out of there. Okay, so what we need to do with this chair is I'm going to extrude these shapes right here, the ones going semi-horizontal. Right now it's sort of slanting backwards, like this arm is taller in the front and it's not as tall in the back, right? We are going to model this chair in so much as these legs and this part, and then we will tilt it back, and then we're going to unwrap it, and then we're going to extrude these pieces. We're going to unwrap it first because we want to make a copy for this side, and it would be better to unwrap it first and then make a copy so that we don't have to unwrap it twice. And then we can also just unwrap these pieces once we make them, and you'll see how simple that works out. Then we will make the hard surface edge loop, so we will come back to the modeling swift loop once again to make some edge loops to hold these edges when we turbo smooth this, but more about that later. Hold tight. Right now what we need to do is when I turn this around, you can see there is black here, and this is kind of a pain because I can't see my, I can't see this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this a black edge too. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the Backface Call, and what this means is on any given surface, there really is only one surface you can see. There are normals, and we'll talk more about normals later, but just hold tight. Normals are the side of a surface that shows you the map that you can see. Now, yes, you can have double-sided. You need to kind of have a little script for that. The game engines often have just a check mark, so behind the scenes they're writing you this script so that you can see two sides. 3ds Max, if I turn on the materials editor and click on this materials, I'll double click on it so we can get our map here. You can see there is a two-sided button that would render both sides. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to see both sides here in this viewport. However, what we have here, because we're just modeling right now, is this impedance to our vision. So I'm going to right click on it and we're going to go to Object Properties, and we're going to check on this Backface Call and say OK. And so now you can see that we can see through this. I can select on it, and we still have our image here, right, when we need it. Let's kind of pull this down a little bit. So if I needed to still see this all the way around and make sure I was doing what I was doing, I have no impedance to my leg here. Okay, so on with how we're going to model this. Now I'm making sure that the back is the back and the front is the front and the side is the side. And when we see the left side, if I hit L and we're looking at this left side, it's really the right side of the object, right? This is the back and this is the front. Okay, always remember that when you're looking at the left, that on the right side is the front and the left side is the back. This is when you hit L. Now when we're hitting front, you can see that this is the leg front. Okay, this I'm going to rotate around to be sure that we're in the front. I'm in the front view. I should be able to see this. So I'm going to click on my snaps toggle, and I'm going to hit E to rotate. And as I do this, you can see at the top there. Oh, ha, silly me. I'm going to undo this. You know what we're in is wireframe. Okay, it's all is good. Oh my God, that's funny. So where there's that. So wireframe. I'm in the front view, but I'm going to hit the perspective and we're going to go back to our edge faces. So anyway, we can see our leg. That's the deal there. Okay, so we're going to extrude these faces. We've cut the geometry that we've needed to you know, select the geometry that we need to extrude. It's sort of like knowing a little bit ahead of time your tools so that you can create the object by having somebody giving you the concept art, or in this case we have this photographic reference. So I'm going to extrude this. Here's the extrude button. We use the when the edge tool is on, we have a connect, and when I click on the polygon, you can see that this menu changes here. So depending on what sub-object you have, depends on what menu you have to choose from. And it further still, when you're on the object itself, you have yet another menu system here. So faces, or polygons in this case, I hit W just to keep it in the move. I'm going to hit the little settings box next to extrude. It already extrudes out. If you first time open 3ds Max, it's going to extrude at 10 centimeters. So once I extrude this out to where I need it, which is going to be about 30, I can just highlight this and type in 30. Again, if you lose the selection with this still open, I can click on this, and I'm holding Control to click on this face, and there it is. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to hit L for the left, and I'm going to tilt this. I'm going to hit P to go into perspective. The top is longer than the bottom here. So I'm going to get my vertices, hit left, and I'm going to just select, I'm going to hit the marquee like this. It's right here is the marquee. Hold this down, and there are other selection sets. So if you're not getting the rectangular marquee, you can just hold this down. It's like Photoshop again. I'm going to reference Photoshop. Just click and drag. And we are in an orthographic view that you know, everything is parallel and perpendicular. So it's great for making sure that things stay in alignment. I'm going to hover over the X to make sure that I'm only going in the X direction, and I'm going to pull that out like that. Okay, so this is the back. And another trick I'm going to show you here, because I like the size of everything so far, I don't want to have to redraw and calculate a whole nother piece. What I can do is I can take one of these pieces and use it, because I'm going to go this way with it, and use it to place here. So I'm going to get the polygon tool, and I'm going to show you another way to select something. So I'm going to hit L again for left. This button right next to the select button. So I have the marquee, right? Selects everything. This button, if I click it, will only select what is fully inside of my marquee. So if I drag it like this, you notice it won't select these polygons, but it did select that polygon. Same here. If I drag it all the way here, it won't select these, but it selects those. So if I turn that off and I do the exact same thing, notice it selected these because they're halfway in, right? The line's going through it. Here, the line is going through it. That's all the way in. It'll only select the ones that's completely inside. So that's handy. I can select this. I'm going to turn it around to make sure I have everything because that's the piece I want. And I'm going to hit L again because I want to make sure I move this in line with this chair. I don't want to move it out of planar with this. I don't want to move it in the X direction, right? I want to move it only in the Y and the Z direction here. So L, well, you know, that's the thing with Max, the pivot. I only want to go up and down and left and right here in the left view. Anyhow, if you hold shift and move, like move this, you'll see that it makes a copy. It's going to immediately want to know if you want this to be a part of this chair, or, you know, what we've modeled here, or do you want this to be a completely separate piece? And in this case, we just want it to be a part of this. We're going to attach it and weld the vertices back to it. Sometimes you might want, for example, you might create a character and you've given them a leather vest. And you would extract polygons like this, like a leather vest. But maybe you don't necessarily want that leather vest to be a part of the character. You want it to be an option whether you see it or not. So you might make it a completely different object. And so you would click on this and you would call it, you know, blue canvas vest or something. I don't know, something alternative to a leather vest or alternative to the character or its own object. Anyway, enough of that. Now the other thing is, because when we took this, we have these holes here. They're useful to us, but we want to face it the other way. But before I do that, I need to kind of take care of the top of this, because I know it's not going to be long enough, and it'll be easier to take care of it now than to take care of it later. So I'm going to get my vertices and grab this, and I know I'm going to need this to be longer. I also know that I don't need the top of this. See, I want the whole thing here. So I'm going to click on this, and I can grab it halfway. Or, you know, I could have left it there, and I could have grabbed the whole thing that way, you know, and that would have been that. Either way, I need to delete it. So okay, so now in this case, this is a border, right? We've deleted, it's got a hole. We have a hole here, right? So these are borders. So if I click on that, often you click on the border and then you'll need to do something with the edge. It's different tools. This whole piece, I'm going to click element now. It's also a good way to say element. This is an element and this is an element. So even once we attach this, you'll notice it'll remain an element because it became a separate piece from this at one point. Again, I'm going to have my snaps toggle and I'm going to rotate it. And now I'm looking down at the bottom. Let me go one more, I'll show you. I was looking right here. If it's the whole thing, you can notice it right above the rotation gizmo when it's a sub-object like this. And when I say sub-object, you'll notice that we are actually using the element sub-object of the whole object. So in that case, we have to look down here. It's still snapping, so I can still rotate it exactly 180 degrees. Okay, I'm also going to now rotate it this way. I'm going to go to my left viewport. Be careful about what you are hovering over, right? I'm in this viewport, so I would only want to rotate it accordingly, right? When I was in the perspective, I could notice that in this case, it's the red. There, you can change your views here to be world, and they would all be, I think, similar. So here I would say world, right? Anyway, let's go back to perspective. I'm rotating it in the same, on the same axes. Okay, left. W to move, and I'm going to move it here. Something like that. I think I rotated it too much. All right, so I'm gonna, this is fine. I'm I want to line this up to where what I'm trying to do here is I'm going to get my vertices and I'll show you this. These need to kind of line up. So I could select all of these. And now if I try to move these, you see I might wobble it this way, and that would be bad. So I can scroll down here and under Edit Geometry. If it's closed, you can, you know, open it. We have our constraints. So here I'm going to click on Edge, and if I push this down a little bit, I can use the marquee to kind of eyeball and line it up, and that's pretty darn close. And this one, okay, so move it down about here. I don't know, there's probably a better way, but this is how I do it. So, you know, whatever. All right, so there's that. And this one, I can grab these and we can push this down on the edge, and I will go there. With that, make sure I grab both of those. Left view. Push that down on the Y. Do something like this. Now I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. Grab both of these and push them down because that'll make it a little easier. I'm going to get this edge, and I'm going to get Modeling tab, Swift Loop, and let me zoom in here. I'm just going to line that up. I clicked it once, and I lost it because I right-clicked. Okay, here we go. I'm going to put this, I guess that'll be about, let's see if that's going to go there. That one I think needs to move. All right, that'll work. All right, so another tool I'm going to show you is called target welding. There's welding and target weld. And in this case, let's see, target weld and weld. And you can see next to the weld we have a little settings. We're not going to do that right now. We're going to use the target weld. And the way that this works is, let me get perspective so I can have a little bit of, so it goes smaller in the back, right? As it goes away, see? All right, target weld means I can click on the thing I want to go to there. Oh, and see how it did not let me? Okay. What we need to do is get rid of this face. There's no way that we can have 3 faces on an edge. There's only the surface and edges on a surface. So we can't have 3 surfaces on an edge. That physically is impossible to do because the face is representing the surface of an object, right? It's hollow. We know it's hollow, but it's representing a solid piece of wood. So it's going to disallow us to have an edge on an edge because in real life that is impossible. So what we're going to do is just delete it. Let's hit the delete button. And we're also going to need to delete these things. Yeah, that one. That one's okay. And this one here, because those are the ends. That one's already gone. All right. Target weld. Click on this, and it will weld to that. Click on this, weld to that. I'm holding Alt. Click on this, move to that. Click on this, move to that. Alt and middle mouse button, I'm holding it down. Just scrolling middle mouse button to zoom out. Scrolling it to move in. I have my target weld still on. This one goes to there. Click on this, put it there. All right, so there is our leg. Now what we're going to do is take this and extrude it up, cut it. You can see the pattern here. It's just a matter of the more you model, you'll have a little bit more foresight of what your tools are and how you might go about creating things. All right, so I'm just gonna say okay with this. Notice it said 30. It comes back where you left it, right? The first time you open 3ds Max, it'll be 10. That's the default. And then anytime after you change it, that's what it'll be every time you open it. So, oh, see, that was weird there. That just because I have this restraint on. So, remember that if you leave that edge on, it's going to be weird. So don't do that. So, put it back to none. Okay, so left view, I'm going to I just said okay. It didn't matter because I can grab this now. And I'm going to move this up here, and I'm going to rotate this. I don't need to have the snaps on. I'm just going to freeform it, but I am going to sort of line that up. I kind of in general feel like this piece of wood is too thick. So what I'm going to do is grab these edges and right here, let's see. No, I'm going to use the vertex. I'm going to grab this vertex and this one. And I'm going to hit W. And I'm also going to use edge. And I'm going to use the X. Nope, that one's not going to work. Undo that. I'm going to use the Y. Nope, that's not going to work either. I'll have to do it one at a time. All right. I'm going to move that in a little bit. And what I want with this one is to move this up. That's better. Darn it. Darn you. There we go. All right, I'm going to put that back on them. It's always a little bit of adjusting. Okay, so this one also, I'm just going to go ahead and get the modeling Swift loop, and right there, and right there. And I'm going to get edge because right click to end that. I'm going to grab this and this, and I'm going to just pull that up. Just because I want to kind of make that clean. Oh no, these, I'll pull this back a little bit. So I can see in here and grab this polygon and delete it. That one's already deleted. So vertex, target weld. Don't worry if they're red from a selection. It's curses. I lost it. Right click. No. Come on, you. All right. So we have this chair. So the thing here now is, knowing what I know about this chair, left view, we can grab all of our vertices here. I'm going to grab all of them except this, and I'm going to say rotate. I'm going to say rotate. E. Not snapping it. I'm going to undo that. Not, whoa. Again, undo the restraint. Silly me. All right, move tool. I'm going to just move it so that that front leg is lined up. Yeah. And all right, so here's another tool. I'm going to show you something. We can, in our view, this sort of helps us pull objects in a certain direction. So right now, if I go to the left viewport, right, and I wanted to extend this leg down, but you know, if this would be wobbly, and I want it to just pull down. It might be difficult here with the vertices. So if I get the polygon, I kind of already know that it will be. If I get the polygon and I'm going to my left viewport, I can look at this to the parent. All right, not the parent. Sometimes you have to check local, and you can see how the gizmo is now in the Z direction, pulling directly in the direction I want it to go. So if I pull this here to the origin, and then I grab my edge, no, my vertex, and I grab this one, you can see that's now kind of cattywampus. So I'm going to go back to my view. But I'm also going to constrain this to the edge again and pull that up to there. Now I kind of want to make sure that those are really flat. So if I grab both of them and hit the scale tool and only in the Y, oop, no, we don't want the edge, so none. And only in the Y, that'll totally flatten it out. What I was doing is instead of this, right, it's going the other direction and it's infinitely getting closer and closer, so it's planar is kind of what's going on there. All right, so knowing what I know about this chair, getting back to that, because we're going to make a copy of this, right? If I hold W and Shift and move this, I have another copy, right? I'm going to say cancel because I don't want to have to unwrap this twice. So before we move on, we're going to unwrap this, but also knowing what I know about this chair and how chairs are made, or wood things really, is that the wood grain is going to go this way here, right? And we also have this, I call it a picture frame kind of groove, right? It's not straight up and down like this one goes right into it. It's cut at an angle, so it has a nice 45-degree sort of joint there. And I know that there's a seam here because this piece of wood, this connects to this one, right? And you can see the seam here. So I know that all of these pieces of wood, the wood grain is going the length of the wood. That's the way wood things are made because that's the way they are strong. The wood grain would not go crossways. That would make this wood very easy to break, right? So we want the wood grain to go in the proper direction in our UV map. And if you haven't messed with the UV map yet, we're going to do that next. But before we do that, I'm going to make sure that we have the proper geometry for this joint. A UV map is based on the edges that you have on your object. So sometimes you might even take your edge loop and have an edge loop or your connect tool like we used earlier. You might even make edges so that you have the proper geometry to unwrap the UV. So what we need to do is create this seam here. And the best way to do it is to also use the target weld. And so I'm in the vertex mode, target weld. And because it's along this edge here, I can target weld that, right? What you can't do is, like, I couldn't target weld this one. I don't think it would let me even if I cut right here, but I can do this because that geometry makes sense, right? So I'm going to put that there, and this one goes there. Okay, so now you see we have an edge here that mimics the way the joint would be put together. All right. Now, chairs also aren't this pointy sharp, right? They've been sanded. This would hurt, if you poked your hand on there or something, that would hurt. So before we put our edge loops on here and create this high poly object, we're going to also need to unwrap this because it would be just easier that way. It's easier to unwrap it at its low poly state than to try to grab all those vertices and make sure everything's correct in its high poly state. So that's what we're going to do next.